everyone, it's Clarice. This is Clarice Reads, and today I'm actually filming a booktube video. I feel like it's been so long. It's been over 2 months since I last uploaded a video to this channel, and that's because in those 2 months I've been focusing mainly on academics, on my career, on just life in general, and that hasn't left me with a lot of mental space and focus to give to booktube or even to reading. But today I actually have some to spare, so I'm going to talk about my reading goals for the first quarter of 2017 and how those reading goals went. If you haven't already watched the video wherein I talked about my reading goals for the first quarter of 2017, I will leave it in a card on the top of the video. But just to summarize, basically this year I decided to not give myself yearly reading goals and instead give myself quarterly reading goals. So for the first quarter of 2017, I gave myself 3 main reading goals. The first of which was to reread more books, the second of which was to reduce the size of my physical TBR, and the third of which is to read more diverse sci-fi. So for my first goal, which is to reread more books, I gave myself a specific goal of rereading 6 books this quarter, which I was able to complete. This quarter, I managed to reread the entirety of the Lock and Key series by Joe Hill and Gabriel Rodriguez, and since I read them in the master editions, that means that those count as 3 books, and those are the first volume, which includes Welcome to Lovecraft and Head Games, the second volume, which includes Crown of Shadows and Keys to the Kingdom, and the third volume, which includes Clockworks and Alpha and Omega. I also managed to reread The Final Empire, which is the first book in the Mistborn trilogy by Brandon Sanderson, as well as The Private Eye by Brian K. Vaughan, and The Sculptor by Scott McCloud. I'm really glad I was able to reread the Lock and Key series and Mistborn, or at least start rereading Mistborn, because you may or may not know that these are some of my favorite series ever. These are probably my 2 favorite series ever, but I found that I actually enjoyed these books a lot more on the reread than I did on the initial read, which is saying a lot because I was basically obsessed with these books while I was reading them. And I think that's because when a series especially is really well done, there are always lots of these subtleties and details that contribute to the overall story that you may not notice on the first read. And because I already read these books before and because I already know how it's going to end, I was really able to appreciate those subtleties and actually notice them when I did before, was able to see a lot of the foreshadowing that actually happened that obviously I didn't know about before, and overall just get such a good experience rereading these books and get so much more out of these books on the reread than I did on the first read. Rereading The Sculptor, on the other hand, was also different because when I read this for the first time, I was actually so overwhelmed by how it hit me emotionally that I immediately declared that it was one of my favorite books. You know, there's some books that just really hit you at the very end of it or while you're reading it, but in the long run they don't really stick with you. This is one of those books, and so I wasn't really sure how I felt about it anymore. What's interesting is I actually ended up giving it a lower rating on Goodreads on the reread than I did on the first read, but I also feel like I appreciated it more on the second read than I did on the first read. Because like I said, when you know how a book's going to end, it's easier to appreciate the subtleties and details that go to building up to that ending. And for comics, those subtleties and details aren't just in the plot itself or in the writing, but in the art. And I just generally like the art here, and I feel like I was able to actually pay attention to it more this time because I wasn't focusing on the plot and on what was happening in the story. And that was nice, and it's nice being able to reread comics because of that. Overall, for that first goal, I'm pretty satisfied with how I did. Obviously, I was able to accomplish it, but I do wish I was able to read more novels, because you may have noticed that 5 out of 6 of those books were comics, but for now, I'm happy with how I did. Moving on to my second goal, which is to reduce the size of my physical to-be-read pile. Specifically, I had planned to reduce it by 5, which means though that if I buy more books, I'm going to also have to read or donate more books. So this quarter, I actually bought 4 physical books, which meant that I had to either read or donate 9 physical books in order to complete this goal. Being totally honest with you, I didn't actually complete this goal by the end of March, though I decided to be lenient with myself and extend that till April 13. And if I extend this quarter over to April 13, then I can say that I completed this goal. So before the end of March, I managed to read Sounds Like Me by Sarah Bareilles. I decided to donate Lost in a Good Book by Jasper Ford. I also managed to read science fiction, Filipino fiction by young adults by lots of different Filipino sci-fi authors. I also managed to read Zoe's Tale by John Scalzi, as well as Strange Natives, The Boy with Capiz Eyes by Paulo Heras. I also managed to read The Mythology Class by Arnold Are, and I decided to donate Ghost Story by Jim Butcher. On April 1, I managed to read Battle Royale, and on April 13, I managed to finish reading The Republic of Thieves by Scott Lynch. So for my TBR update videos, I kind of talk about a similar thing, but there I am focusing both on digital and on physical books on my TBR. But the reason I set this as my goal specifically is because I wanted to focus on my bookshelf, and because my bookshelf is something that I want to eventually get to a certain state. I eventually want all the books in my bookshelf to be books that I love. Having a lot of physical TBR books does not really match up with that goal, and that's why I want to reduce my TBR. I feel like there are a couple of things that got in the way of me achieving this goal at the time that I wanted to, and one was the fact that, again, I just didn't have much time to read in the last couple of months, but also because I do want to get into the habit of reading ebooks or borrowing books from the library first before I decide whether I want to buy a physical copy of them. So I've been buying and reading a lot of ebooks, which takes away time from reading physical books, which is weird because reading those ebooks jives with my long-term goal, and it goes together with like the long-term habits that I want to have, but it's also getting in the way of me reaching that long-term goal because I still have these physical books that I want to read. But overall, I'm happy with how I did, especially since the last couple of books that I read, even though they weren't in March, they're both pretty big books. Moving on to my third and final goal, which is to read more diverse sci-fi. This is actually the goal that I think I objectively did the best at, and that's because I set a specific goal of reading 3 diverse sci-fi books, and what ended up happening is I read 6 by the end of March, but 7 by the end of the time period that I set for the second goal, which is between January 1 and April 13. So the books that I managed to read for this goal were science fiction, Filipino fiction for young adults by various different Filipino authors, also A Planet for Rent by Yoss, Parable of the Sower by Octavia Butler, The Sea is Ours by various different authors from all over Southeast Asia, On the Edge of Gone by Corinne Delvis, Kindred, also by Octavia Butler, and Battle Royale. As you can see, I was really excited about this goal based on the results, and that's because it combined something which I really strive towards doing, which is to read more diversely, with a genre that I do want to explore more. I like sci-fi because sci-fi usually explores possibilities. It explores what if this, what if that. And adding diverse elements to that makes sci-fi even more interesting than it already is, because it allows us to explore a lot more what ifs, because it gives us new perspectives, new cultures, new backgrounds in general. And that's what I loved about reading books for this goal, and that's why even when I was finished, I just kept going and kept going. If there were anything I wish I did different in terms of how I approach this goal, is I wish I read more diversely in terms of the types of diversity I read about. If that makes sense, 6 out of the 7 books that I read for this goal were diverse in terms of race or in terms of country of origin, which was great because it allowed me to read about a lot of different cultures and a lot of different experiences. But at the same time, only one of those books was diverse in another way. Specifically, this book was On the Edge of Gone, which was diverse in the sense that it followed an autistic main character. And I really do wish that I read more, or I read diversely in terms of sexuality, which I wasn't really able to do. But overall, again, obviously I'm super happy with how I did with this goal. So that was my update on my reading goals for the first quarter of 2017. I generally think I did pretty well. Technically, I accomplished all the goals if I allow myself to change the time frame of the quarter, which may seem like cheating, but it also takes away from the time I have in the next quarter, so I'm going to allow it. Anyway, feel free to talk to me about some of your reading goals and how you're doing this year, or about some of the diverse sci-fi books that you may want to recommend to me in the comment section down below. It's been great filming for BookTube again. I've missed it so much. I really miss interacting with the community because I haven't even been watching BookTube videos in the last couple of months. So I really hope that I can be more active again and that I can put up more videos because I really miss doing this. Anyway, thank you so much for watching, and I hope to see you next time. Bye!